So if we dive right into it, I'm just gonna start off and say I take the tank off, and it's got the Allen bolts up there, and then you've got down here your two 10 mils. Just pop the seat off, and just take the two hoses off the tank, and then the main fuel line there. Whoops, got a little fuel still in there, and just set the tank aside. So the big part's gonna be obviously when we get to removing the valve cover. To get to that though, you're gonna have to, if you don't have it already removed, your AIS, your air induction system, this is removed with the whole shot kit. Let me see, there they are, little caps that go on there. That, obviously saves up a lot of time if you have that removed already. After that, you're gonna have to remove your radiator. So if you haven't drained it, this is drained already, you're gonna wanna drain it, and then you're gonna wanna take off the two hoses on top, and we'll go from there. So I'll start taking this apart. Alright, so to start, you're gonna wanna drain your cooling system. Start by detaching the lower radiator hose, and then have a catch pan under that to catch the coolant that comes out. I already emptied mine though, and that's why there's no coolant coming out. So use this method instead of the drain bolt, because those like to break. So coming around to the top of the engine, you're going to have the two hoses. If my memory serves me correctly, those are 6 mils. Or you could use a Phillips head screwdriver as well, but using a socket will make it much easier. As you can see, you got to get the one up top as well. Coming from this side of the engine, you're going to want to remove the spark plug boot here, and then loosen the clamp around this hose as well. And the hose on the radiator, loosen that, and then pull the little line off there. When you get around to swinging the radiator forward, that should then detach from the big hose. It might be tight though. And then the clamp I just loosened, to get to the other clamp, you might have to hit it from the top. Otherwise, just go from the side of the engine, just run the screwdriver or socket through the side case to get to it. So now we're going to be pulling these top hoses. Now they were stuck on pretty good, so I used a pair of needle nose pliers just to pry up on them, using the case for leverage. You'll see a little bit of gunk on there. That was probably what was responsible for these being stuck on there. So now with the bottom part of the hose removed, I'm going to work at the top part, and it was the same issue. Had some gunk up there, so it didn't really want to release. What I had to do, I just ended up having to grab it from the top and twist, kind of like you were tightening or loosening a screw, but just twist the entire tube, and that would break it free without you tearing it by pulling at it. Okay, so I already went ahead and loosened, well, I actually took all the bolts out from the cylinder head cover, or valve cover, whatever you want to call it. They're all 5 mil hex head bolts. Just take them off. Make sure you clean everything off up here. You don't want debris falling in there when you take the cover off. And to make this easier, I took off the radiator. It's 2 bolts, I think. There's one up here, right here, and then there's another one here, and then just take the hoses off, and then to get the wire harness unplugged, it's right up top, and you just obviously take it off, and then I also already removed the spark plugs, but just take all your spark plugs out. That'll make it easier when turning the crankshaft, because there won't be compression in there. But like I said, I already took those off, so I'm just going to pull the boots out. I left the boots in there to keep it clean. So from here, I already checked my valve clearance. I went ahead and checked it, but I'm just starting from here. I can show you how to check some of them on it, but this might be a little bit of a pain to take off. I mean, when I tried getting it off, it did not want to come off. I was kind of just trying to wiggle it around, trying to break free, just let it sit for a little bit. Honestly, kind of started to, I guess, would it be unsettle? I mean, it would settle when you're bolting it down, but you can get it off. Just be a little patient with it. And then you're just gonna pull the cover off. It's a little bit of a pain. It's not really bad though. Just lift it up, pull it out the side, and now your cover's off. You know, just set it to the side, whatever. I'm gonna put it in my tool bag. Now, when you're at this spot, you also got to take this cover off as well. So where your, it's technically your timing advancer. It's like something rotor. I forgot the exact name. Same thing. 5mm hex head bolts. None of these are going to even be on there that tight. Now, for this one, when you take this off, you are going to have to replace the gasket on this, unless you're lucky and it comes off in one piece. It's off in one piece. I mean, you feel free to use it. It's only like $5 for an OEM gasket though, so honestly, if I were you, I would just spend $5 and get a new gasket just to be safe. Now, all these except these top two are the same size, lengthwise. They're a little bit longer, so if you for some reason feel like you might forget that, just do this. So you take all these off, take the cover off. This will either come out with it, otherwise you want to put it back in there. I would do that. There'll be one here and then one here. Same thing, the little like spacer things that kind of holds the case on. You can see it's in this. I'm just going to go ahead and put it back into the engine. Now I'm going to take my two longer bolts, which would be these two, and I'm just going to put them back in here. You don't have to thread them all the way through, just, you know, enough that they're going to stay. You won't have to worry about them coming out. You know, like I said, I mean, I know they're longer, so I'm not concerned, but I'm just going to do it just to show you. So what you're going to do, and the same thing, this rotor is already set at top dead center. Now you're going to see, on the rotor, that little T there, well, it's a little bit before top dead center, but I'll show you. So that little T, you want to line it up with that mating surface right there. So that's it's a 14 mil. So I'm just gonna turn this. Always turn it clockwise. Oh, I passed it. Whoops. All right. Well, you're gonna have to get for each cylinder you're checking, it's got to be at top dead center on, shoot, what was it, the combustion stroke? I think that's what it said. So what you're gonna do is, I'm gonna have to turn this around. I'm gonna keep turning this. Let me just show you. I already knew that cylinder 1 was on its combustion stroke for top dead center, so I'm gonna turn this. So when you go to the H, that's obviously 180 degrees, 360 here. I'm gonna go again here. And so what I do is I'll hold this side with my hand, and then I'll tap the bottom with my finger while adding a little bit of pressure, and that'll slowly move the rotor so you can get it a lot closer to top dead center. So I just got to go a little bit more. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you how to check the valves with the shims. Okay, so we're on the left side if you're sitting on the bike. Now, basically, the way you can tell the cam is on the combustion stroke, or well, the cylinder, is how the cam lobes are facing. So I showed on the other side, you got to turn that rotor until the T-mark's lined up with that dash on the case. You want to then check on your cylinder 1, and if your cam lobes are facing away like this is, you know it's top dead center for the combustion stroke for that cylinder. Now, the clearances are going to measure between 0.21 and 0.25 millimeters for the exhaust side, which is the front of the engine here, and then the intake is between 0.11 and 0.20 millimeters. So you're gonna need a feeler gauge, and I've already measured all the clearances I said before, but I'm just gonna give you an example on how to do this. So you check the cylinders by going between 1, 2, 4, and 3, and each time you gotta spin the rotor. So I'll show you how to do that. So right now the rotor is set, you know, the cams are set, it's on the combustion stroke for cylinder 1. So I know what fits this, so I'm gonna show you what fits this. This is 0.2 or 0.20. Now this goes in, I can push it in like this, and I'm not having to grab it by here to try and force it in. Now if I give it a little bit of wiggle, it doesn't really come out, but if I just give a little bit of pressure, it will slide. So there's a little bit of pressure between the lobe and the seat or the hat, whatever you want to call it, and that's perfect. So I mean, like I said, I can give it a little bit of wiggle, it doesn't really come out, but if I give it a little bit more, it'll slide out, and that's what you're looking for. So that's your you know, that's how I know this is a 20. Now I'm going to show you how it, you know, if it's too tight, and I'll show you how to tell if it's too loose too. So I'm going to try a 23 or a 0.23. I'm just going to say 23 so you guys know. So it's 0.23 millimeters, and this, look, it wants to bend. I can't really get it in now. If I really try, I can force it in, but you then gotta also pull to get it out. You can't just do that to get it out. I mean, you gotta pull it. So you know that's too tight. Now to show you if it's too loose, I'm gonna use an 18, and the 18, it just slides in like that. I mean, it literally just goes right in. That's too loose. You know, you don't want that. So for the intake side, what I had to do, because this is a 1/2 inch thick, this will work on all the exhaust side, but on the intake, that's too thick because it won't fit between these gaps. You can only measure the lobes that are on the outside. So you're gonna cut if you want, or you can pick up a set that's already that's thin enough for this. You can find them. My issue though is finding sets that are in, let's say, be 0.15, 0.16, 0.17. It's very hard to find that. You're gonna find them generally in increments of 3. Now the low end of this side obviously is a 0.11. So what I did is I cut my 0.10 and 0.13s down the center like that so they'll fit. So to start, I'm just gonna go on the tightest end of it and see if it fits through. And it does pretty easily. Now I don't have a 0.11, so this is what I kind of came up with. It went in too easy for me to say it was a 10, but if I go and check using my 13, it won't go in. Now, what I did then, because I know it's a little bit too smooth of the 10 going in, I just said 11. Now, unless you can find a set, you know, that goes in increments of 0.01, that'd be great. Honestly, if you guys know where one's at, just send one in the link because I would like to buy it. The second valve here I know is a 0.10 because it goes in with a little bit of pressure, and it's just got a little, you know, it's a little bit of pressure in there. You can feel just a little bit. So that's 0.10. This, honestly, I could probably call this a 0.10 if I wanted to. I just went up just because the fact that I could just do that with a well, yeah, it's flimsy. I mean, you know, you'll get the feel of it. Just keep going over it, and you'll kind of feel how, you know, you'll get a feel for it. Just keep going over them. You'll notice which ones slide in really easy, which one just needs a smidge of pressure, and that's what you want. So, coming back over to the rotor, the T is lined up. Now, like I said, it's gonna go for cylinders 1, 2, 4, and 3. That's how the firing order is on this. So you're gonna then take your 14 mil and you're gonna spin the rotor, and then there's an H. Just kind of line it up. What I do, you'll see. Hold on. Make sure you're like right at level with it. So what I do is I line the H1 up right in the center, or this little notch will be lined up with this little flat spot here, and it seems almost the exact same way when you have it set where the T is. Now, so it's spun 180 degrees. Now that means cylinder 2 is on its combustion stroke. So we come back to this side. Let's see if I can, might be a little difficult to see. I'll see if I can get in there, just to give you an idea. Okay, so we are in front of the engine right now. Sorry, it's a really hard camera angle, but as you can see where the lobes are facing, again, they're facing out. That's what you want. You want the lobes facing out that way. That's again the exhaust stroke, or the exhaust side, my bad. And then you'll notice the same thing for the intake. Here we go, I can get it. Let me see. There we go, that's the intake. Same thing, it's facing away from the center. You're gonna do the exact same thing with the feeler gauge. You're gonna come through. It's here, the center part here, and under this here. Now obviously you're gonna insert the gauge from the inside, and that you're gonna go from the inside here and through. Do the same thing for the exhaust stroke, and you're gonna measure all of your clearances, just to show you, you know, how to get to the other, check the other clearances. I'm just gonna run you through everything again. So you're gonna go to the rotor down here again, and you are going to, again, take your 14 mil, spin this always clockwise, till you get to the T. So the T mark is just about lined up, and now you can check cylinder number 4. And as you can see, there's the lobes facing away from the center. Same thing for this, facing away. And now you can check 4, and you're gonna run through one more time. Gonna switch this back to the H. It's a halfway point, like so. Actually, maybe go a little bit further than that. So this is the notch I was talking about there. 2, you can line that spot up. That actually seems to be almost perfect. So you're just gonna give it a little. There we go. And now you can check cylinder number 3. It's kind of a little hard, it's more difficult to see. You can see your cam lobes there. There's one of them for the intake, again, facing out. And then the exhaust. Get an angle for you. There's one of them facing out, and now you're going to check cylinder number 3. Now, before you start disassembling, you want to set this rotor back to top dead center. So on your next spin over, this is going to be set to top dead center on cylinder number 1 for the combustion stroke. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. So I'm going to set the camera down for a minute, and I'll show you where I'm at. Okay, so that's where I'm at. See, those are lined up, those 2 lines, that line and that line. Now I'm back at top dead center for cylinder 1 on the combustion stroke. So this is when you're going to start to disassemble the cams. You know, you're going to have all these the cam retainers or caps, whatever you want to call them. All these on both sides. Now, when you do this, you gotta do them in a crisscross pattern. Manual does not have a specific bolt sequence though. So we'll get to that then. These are my clearances I measured. Obviously exhaust side starting from cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then same thing for the intake, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you're gonna want to set it up. You know, make sure you're keeping track of what's what. Alright, so back with the voiceover. In the video I started rambling a lot, but as you can see right now I'm pointing to an intake valve at 0.15, and that's smack in the center, so I just put OK on it because I'm not going to have to change it. Now I do have the 0.11, 0.12s, and 0.13s that are technically in spec, but they're the bottom of the range, and I'd rather bump them up because over time, from the valve hitting into the valve seat, your clearances usually always tighten up, especially on these bikes. So the same thing for the exhaust side. I got a .21 that's way at the bottom end, but I have one that's at .23, and that's smack in the center for the exhaust clearances, and then same thing for the intake. I have a .15. Those I'm going to keep, but I'm going to change the other 18 valves, even though some of them are in spec. I'd rather move them up to the looser end, because over time they should tighten up. Okay, so going by the book, what you need to do is you're going to take a, I think it's a 10 mil actually, I gotta go get a 10 mil, but you're going to loosen your camshaft sprocket bolts first, before you even bother loosening the the tensioner right here. So before I start, I'm not going to loosen these yet, I'm going to loosen these second. So as I just said, I'm going to remove these bolts. As you can see, they're marked with, I used a paint marker. Those are the ones that I want to remove second. So what I'm doing is I'm turning the crankshaft to gain access to the bolts that aren't marked. Now I said don't remove them, but you do want to remove them completely, because when cylinder 1 is back at top dead center on the combustion stroke, you can't gain access to those bolts because the case is in the way. So once the bolts are removed, like I said, you'll then turn the crank back so it's at top dead center for cylinder number 1, and then you're going to proceed to remove the timing chain tensioner. You're going to take a 10, and well, you're just going to break it loose. So these are the bolts I was talking about. You want to completely remove them. Don't do what I did in the video. Just completely take the bolts out, and then you want to put it back to top dead center for cylinder number 1. My bad, past top dead center. I'm gonna go back around. Okay, there we are. Okay. So we're back at top dead center. Now you can take a 10, you can loosen your top. Okay. So you're going to loosen those, then you're going to come to the side where your chain tensioner is, and now you're going to loosen your chain tensioner. I'm going to take the cap off here. It's also a 10. Take the cap. And then inside there is a it looks like a flathead. You don't have to worry about that right now though. You'll worry about that when you're putting it back together. Let me grab I think it's an 8, which it most likely is. Yeah, it's an 8. Need my extension. What you're going to want to do here though, before you loosen this, is you're going to want to take a, oh my bad, you're going to want to take a tie, like a tie, wire, I don't know, something, hold this up to the frame somewhere. You don't want it dropping down, so let me go find something for that. Okay, I got some speaker wire, so you just have that handy, ready for that. Now before we pull this off, I'm going to mark the camshaft sprocket and mark the chain as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a spot. So I'm going to use this spot here. I'm going to mark it, and then I'm going to count these little rivets in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm just going to put another mark there. I'm going to do the same amount on this side as well. That way, you know, it's easy to remember. There's 4 spots in between it, so the same thing. I'm just gonna go here. I'm gonna put a mark there and here, and I'm gonna 1, 2, 3, 4, and leave the mark there. Make sure it's on there good. And that is going to make sure, you know, I get the timing back when I put this together. Okay, so you're just gonna take your 8mm, loosen these bolts. Let me show you. I have this just tied here, so it doesn't fall when I take the tensioner out. Oh wait, that's already loose, so. Those bolts are the same size, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Shit. Okay. So here's a tensioner. It's spring loaded. It is now all the way out, but what you're gonna do is to re-tighten this thing back down is, oh, by the way, you're gonna need a gasket for this too. I forgot to say something about that. This is also a gasket that's just gonna fall apart. So this is now off, and this obviously is loose now. So let's go take a look at what we can do. Finish taking this gasket off. Okay, so at this stage, you're gonna loosen the camshaft retaining bolts. Do it in a crisscross pattern, starting from the outside in. So I started from, you know, the front over here, then the back corner, you know, all the way to the back, then moved like to this one. You just go crisscross and work your way to the inside. Slowly loosen them, do a little bit at a time, and just, you know, take it easy. It's not that difficult. And then you'll be able to pull this. Let's see, this one's a little, nope, that's good. So yeah, they're all loose. I'm gonna just loosen them by hand now. Make sure I don't obviously drop anything in there. So be careful at this point, and you're gonna repeat the same process on this side. Okay, so as you can see, both the cams are out. I still got my marks on the chain, and then I also have it tied, like I said, all the way up here now. And then down here I have it tied as well to make sure it doesn't skip a tooth on the rotor either because of this being loose. I actually tied that before I removed the cams. Well, before I removed the second one. You remove the exhaust one first, then the intake. So I got them over here on this towel. Everything, you know, corresponds. That's the order the parts go on. You know, just go over this, etc. Just keep it organized. You don't want to scratch these things up. So now you'll be able to access your valve hats, and you can reshim your valves. There's a few ways you can do this. I'm going to use a magnet to get the hat out. You're just going to take the magnet and you're just going to go with the valve hat. You're going to lift up, and then the valve hat comes out. Inside the valve hat is a shim. So take the shim out. On this is a number. Let's see if I can focus in on it. Hold up. So on here's a number. That's going to be your valve shim thickness. You'd read it. It says one. This one says 196. What that comes out to is 1.96 millimeters. So to double check that, take a micrometer and check the size to make sure it's still that size, I take the micrometer. If it's off, I will still put 196, and then let's say it was a little bit thicker, a little bit smaller, let's just say 195. I will just put in parentheses next to it 195, and that's how I'll keep track of these. Now you're going to do this for every single valve, just so I can keep track. I have been putting them right back in, so where they go, and then writing everything on a sheet. I took every shim out, and I measured every shim, as well as recorded the number that was on the shim. Some of them measured, they seemed like they measured a little higher, like this one. It said 198, but I checked with the micrometer, and it was 199. Same thing for this one here, and here, and here. So I still put the number that was on the shim, and in parentheses I put the measured number if it measured differently. So to get an idea of like what you can do, is you're gonna get yourself a shim kit. Well, that's dirty, so to a blank page so I don't mess this up. Now it's gonna come with a bunch of different shims. Generally, though, it's going to be 3 of each. That's what the hot cams one is. So what you're gonna do is, let's say, right here, valve number 2, I'm obviously going to want it to be right dead center, so I'm going to want a 195, because that'll gap it down 5, so that'll give me a 0.15 millimeter gap. So what I'll do is get the, where is it at? Here it is. You'll get your new shim. Might be hard to see, but on the, yeah, it's gonna be a pain to see, but on there it's gonna say 195. So what you could do is make sure you have enough of what? Take the shim and lay it where you want it, and now that means you freed up a 200. So if there's somewhere else in there that needs a 200, you know, you can figure things out. So take your time when you're doing this, make sure you have enough shims, and then you can start going from there. What I did here is I put all the numbers down, and I took away what I needed to get them basically dead set in the center. And out of the kit, the shims that will fit just about exactly, as you can see that I wanted a 186, but I got a 185, so I'll go with that because it's not off by much. Same thing for this. I wanted a 194, but I'll just go a smidge tight. Put a 195 in there, and then same thing with this. You know, I'll just go off. It'll be 0.14, which is almost right in the center because it's between 0.11 and 0.20. Otherwise, you could just go and find them individual. You can try and find these exact sizes online, but you're going to have to most likely buy them individual, which I'm most likely going to end up doing, as I wanted to get them as dead set in the center as I can. So, you know, this is a little helpful tip. Oh, I know I skipped a little bit. It's basically the reverse process to get these cams back in, and an easy way to do this is actually take off the sprocket. So you take off the bolts, pull the sprocket out of the way, and you can put the cam in there, and then you can kind of fit the sprocket in there, get the chain over it, and put the top bolt in. And now you're gonna do crisscross pattern for the cam caps. So, you know, you work your way around to make sure you tighten everything down evenly. Just keep checking the sides, you know, look at the gaps on them and make sure each side's even. And it's only, it's 10 Newton meters for the final tightening. So once it's bottomed out, you'll tighten it down to like 5 Newton meters first, and then go back around in a crisscross pattern and tighten it down again to 10 Newton meters. Okay, so at this point you're going to want to take, well, get yourself a torque wrench. It's 10 Newton meters or 88.5 inch-pounds. So like I said before, you want to start from the outside in, or honestly, just go crisscross pattern, and you will set it halfway. So right now I'm set halfway at like 40, I don't know, like around 45. And you're gonna start, I'm just gonna start from the outside in, as long as you crisscross. So you're gonna take it, that's it. You know, if you know how to use a torque wrench, this won't be an issue. I'm just gonna go crisscross pattern. And, you know, tighten all of them like that. So do that at the halfway mark first, and then you'll come back through and you'll do it at its full torque setting. So yeah, just go through the torque wrench, do them all in a crisscross pattern. Cams are in, I'll torque down to 88.5 inch-pounds. They're not like fully technically secure yet, because I'm gonna have to turn this around and tighten down the sprocket bolts. But before we even go ahead and do that, you got your 2 gaskets if you ordered them. Timing tensioner gasket, and then this is for the cover at the bottom. But before we worry about the cover at the bottom, we gotta put the tensioner back in, which what you do for that is you're gonna unscrew the top part, and then in there is gonna be a little flathead, and you're gonna have to take flathead and you'll spin it, and that will bring the tensioner in, and you got to install it like that and then bolt it down into the case. I'll find the torque specs for that when I show that, but yeah, so that's where you can go for now. And when you do that, then you can recheck clearances. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin the crank over, and I'll do a full 2 turns at the bottom. So I do so I get my cylinder 1 back to top dead center on the combustion stroke, and then I'm going to recheck clearances just to make sure everything is, you know, where I want it to be. And then I can start assembling the bike and get the coolant in there, and then you can, I guess, go ahead and crank it over. But spinning this also is going to make sure, I don't know if you can manage to do this, but as you can see, I marked my cams. Everything's obviously lined right back up. So if you somehow manage to mess that up severely and your valves are coming down, is your cylinder's coming up, and that would obviously wreck the engine. So spinning that will just, I guess, make sure that you got that there's space between those and that you didn't screw it up. I mean, if it gets stuck, then obviously you severely screwed something up. So we'll start with the cover. I'm very simple, like I said. You're just gonna twist the screw in there. It's gonna pull the tensioner in, keep that in there while you put the bolts in, and then when you're good, just let it go. It'll press down on the tensioner, or the tensioner will press down on the chain slide here, and then it'll apply the tension to the chain. These will be tightened down to 17 inch-pounds. So just take a torque wrench. You may need to put the bike into gear when you go to tighten these bolts down. As you'll see when I tighten this one down, it does turn the camshaft. So put it into gear, and then you can hold down on the rear brake with your one hand and then tighten it down with obviously your other hand, and that'll keep that from spinning. Once you get your tensioner on, same thing, 10 Newton meters. And like I said, these go to 17 foot-pounds, just 24 Newton meters. Just spin it over. If you want to go ahead, double check your cam caps, make sure they're all still torqued down. And then if you would like, you can also then check your clearances again. For the valve cover, or the cylinder head cover, or cam cover, whatever it's called in the manual, you're going to want to get Yamaha Bond. It's just a gasket sealer. So what you'll use this for is these half moons here. And then also down here, you need to put some in this section where the wires run through for the timing advancer. So I'm going to go ahead and, I showed earlier, your new gasket for that. I'll just bust this open. I'll just clean it up after. It's kind of a little runny, but that's all right. Let's cap this off. Your gasket. You can just stick the gasket on now if you would like. Make sure I got that Yamaha bond on there. And then you can take your cover. Again, if you want, I'm just gonna go ahead. I know there's excess here, so I'm just gonna take a little bit of excess. Just gonna put it on this part of the cover. It's all right. And I'm gonna go ahead and put the cover on. Okay. Then just reverse process like everything else has been. Put your 2 bolts in. Top, those are your bigger bolts. 5mm. And just like everything else, when you get to tightening the bolts down, just do crisscross. Now you're going to take your valve cover, just make sure it's clean. Got a little bit of dog hair on it, but whatever, it's typical for my house. Anyway, so you got the little half moons on these, and that's what you're going to want to put a little bit of gasket sealer on. You either put it right on here or you can put it on there. Either way is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Actually, I'm gonna line this up first. I'm gonna put this over, then I'll get the gasket maker on there. Okay. Just do a little, wipe a little bit off. And now we can install valve cover bolts. This this one, the gasket came off, but it's alright, just goes right back in. So just like everything else has been, it's a reverse process. Just put the 6 valve cover bolts back in, and then tighten them down, and then torque them down. I'll put the torque specs in the description. Now, I did not show installing the radiator, but obviously it's the reverse process. There's nothing special with putting the radiator in. You don't need any gasket sealer or anything like that. So just put everything back together, and then you'll fill up the cooling system back up with coolant, and you'll go from there. A little coolant there. Wanna open the garage door? Oof, I'm a little nervous to push the button. Here we go. He runs! Alright, so as you can see, the bike started up. Now, with the cooling system, just keep a funnel in there like I'm doing here, and I added more coolant as it started. Obviously the water pump's going to run, push some coolant through the system, get the air out, wait until it's up to operating temperature. You'll know like the fan will kick on, thermostat should open, you know, all that good stuff, get all the air out, and then just keep topping it off with some coolant until, you know, it's topped off.